There is nothing quite like the feeling of driving home after a long day at work, expecting the comfort and safety of family. I had just landed a new position at a local marketing company, and even though I was exhausted, I felt hopeful about finally getting back on my feet. For the past 18 months, I had been living in my parents' basement, saving every penny to move out and surprise them with my independence. As I turned onto Maple Street that Tuesday evening, I could see something scattered across our front lawn. Black garbage bags. My heart started racing as a terrible realization began to creep in. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and if you have ever felt like the black sheep of your family, hit that like button. This story is about to take a turn that will shock you just as much as it shocked me that day. The moment I stepped out of my beat-up Honda, my worst fears were confirmed. Those garbage bags contained my belongings. I could see my Dell laptop case sticking out of one torn bag, my work clothes scattered across another, and my college photo album spilling onto the wet grass. My heart hammered against my chest as the reality hit me like a freight train. Standing in the center of this nightmare was my mom, Patricia, 58 years old, with her phone held high, recording everything. Beside her stood my brother Marcus, 32 years old and unemployed, living with his girlfriend Jessica and my sister Amber, 26, and desperately trying to become a social media influencer. The sight of them together, cameras rolling, told me this was no spontaneous decision. This had been planned. Patricia's voice cut through the evening air like a knife. 29 years old, living in my basement like a parasite. Get out now. Her words were cold, calculated, performed for the camera she held steady in her manicured hands. I had never heard her speak to me with such venom, not even during our worst arguments. Marcus stepped forward and kicked one of my bags, sending my books sliding across the pavement. Finally, the family loser is gone, he shouted, playing to whatever audience my mother was broadcasting to. His voice carried that same mockery I remembered from childhood, but this felt different, crueler, more permanent. But it was Amber who delivered the most devastating blow. She had her own phone out, live streaming to her followers, her voice animated with fake excitement. "Y'all watching loser sister get what she deserves? She owes mom $8,000 in back rent." The number hit me like a physical punch. $8,000. I had been contributing $600 monthly for utilities and groceries. The math did not add up, but in that moment, truth seemed irrelevant to them. My internal world was crumbling as I tried to process what was happening. These were the same people I had helped through countless crises. I had driven Patricia to every single chemotherapy appointment last year when she battled breast cancer. I had taken care of the house-cooked meals and held her hand through the worst days of her treatment. I had helped Robert, my dad, recover from his back surgery, doing his physical therapy exercises with him and managing his medications. The memories flooded back as I stood there in shock. Just 6 months earlier, Patricia had hugged me and said I was her rock, her source of strength during the cancer treatment. Marcus had borrowed $300 from me just last month, promising to pay it back when his unemployment benefits started. Amber had asked me to help her with her social media strategy, praising my marketing background and creativity. Now they stood before me like strangers performing cruelty for an invisible audience. The $8,000 claim made no sense whatsoever. I had moved back home after my divorce from Derek, broken and financially drained, but I had never been a financial burden. Every month I handed over $600 without complaint. I bought groceries, paid for utilities, and even covered the cable bill that Amber needed for her streaming attempts. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I had ever experienced. This was not about money or responsibility. This was about humiliation, about content creation, about turning my personal crisis into their entertainment. I could see it in the way Amber angled her phone for the best lighting, in the way Marcus played up his disgust for maximum effect, in the way Patricia delivered her lines with theatrical precision. My confusion gave way to a burning realization that this moment would define everything that came next. I could either break down and give them the reaction they clearly wanted, or I could find strength I never knew I possessed. The choice was mine, and somehow, standing there surrounded by my scattered belongings and the wreckage of my trust, I began to feel something unexpected. Not just pain, but a strange kind of clarity. Just when I thought the humiliation could not get worse, my father, Robert, appeared. At 60 years old, this retired factory worker who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework grabbed my car keys from my hand and threw them directly at my face. The metal struck my cheek, leaving a sharp sting that would bruise by morning. "You are not our daughter anymore," he bellowed, his voice carrying across the entire neighborhood. "Real women do not mooch off their parents at your age." His words felt like a physical assault, each syllable designed to strip away whatever dignity I had left. This was the same man who had called me his little princess, who had walked me down the aisle at my wedding just 3 years earlier. The sound of my father's voice had drawn even more attention. Neighbors began appearing on their porches, phones in hand, recording this family destruction like it was free entertainment. Mrs. Patterson from next door actually shouted across her fence, "About time we were tired of seeing her beat-up Honda lower our property values." Her husband tried to pull her back inside, clearly uncomfortable with the cruelty, but she shook him off, enjoying her moment in someone else's spotlight. The teenage Johnson kids from down the street had gathered on their front steps, laughing and recording with their phones. Mr. and Mrs. Chen from across the street watched from their living room window, shaking their heads in what looked like disappointment, though I could not tell if they disapproved of my family's behavior or my supposed failures as a daughter. Amber's live stream was gaining momentum. I could hear her reading comments aloud. "We are at 22,000 viewers now," she announced excitedly. "Chat is saying kick her out, deadbeat sister. Oh, this comment says real families do not enable losers." She was feeding off the online cruelty, using strangers' words to justify this public execution of our relationship. Marcus continued his performance, grabbing more of my belongings and throwing them around for dramatic effect. My jewelry box opened mid-air, sending earrings and necklaces my grandmother had given me scattering across the concrete driveway. He stomped on a framed photo of our family from last Christmas, the glass crunching under his work boots. Robert was not finished either. "We raised a failure," he continued screaming. "This is what happens when you coddle kids." His face was red, with manufactured rage veins bulging in his neck as he played the disappointed father role to perfection. "She has been freeloading for 18 months. Patricia added fuel to the fire, her voice getting shriller with each word. 18 months of nothing but excuses and empty promises. We have had enough." She was practically spitting as she spoke, her phone never wavering from capturing every moment of my humiliation. But something strange was happening as I stood there absorbing this assault. Memories were flooding back, but not the painful ones they probably expected. Instead, I was remembering the truth. I was remembering driving Patricia to her oncologist appointments at 6 in the morning, sitting in waiting rooms for hours while she received treatment. I was remembering cooking special meals when she was too nauseous to eat, researching cancer-fighting recipes online, and holding her hair back when the chemotherapy made her sick. I remembered helping Robert through his recovery, setting alarms to remind him to take his pain medication, helping him with exercises the physical therapist had taught us, and driving him to follow-up appointments when Patricia was too weak from her own treatment. I remembered contributing not just money, but time, energy, and genuine care to this family that was now discarding me like trash. The $8,000 debt they kept mentioning was a complete fabrication. $600 monthly for 18 months totaled $10,800, which I had faithfully paid. They actually owed me money for all the extra groceries, gas, and household items I had purchased without ever asking for reimbursement. As this realization crystallized, something shifted inside me. The neighbors were getting uncomfortable. Mrs. Patterson's husband had successfully pulled her inside, looking ashamed of his wife's outburst. The Johnson teenagers were whispering among themselves, and I caught fragments of their conversation. "That seems really mean, and why are they filming this?" Even some of Amber's live stream comments were turning. I could hear her voice becoming more defensive as she read, "Someone just said this looks cruel, and Chad is asking why we are doing this publicly." Her confident performance was starting to crack as her audience questioned the family's behavior. Marcus was beginning to look uncertain too. He kept glancing at Patricia as if waiting for direction, asking quietly, "Are we going too far?" But Patricia doubled down, her voice getting louder and more vicious. "She needs to learn responsibility. This is tough love." I realized this was my moment of choice. I could scream, cry, beg, or fight back with words. I could try to defend myself against their lies and accusations, or I could do something they would never expect. I could take control of this situation with dignity and strength they had clearly forgotten I possessed. Standing there among my scattered belongings, looking at the faces of people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, I made a decision that would change everything. I was not going to give them the breakdown they were obviously hoping to capture on camera. Instead, I was going to show them exactly who I really was. I began loading my belongings into my Honda with deliberate calm. Each movement was measured, dignified, refusing to give them the emotional explosion they were clearly hoping to capture on their phones. My hands were steady as I folded clothes, carefully placed my laptop in its case, and gathered the scattered pieces of my life from their front lawn. The family continued their verbal assault as I worked. Patricia kept shouting about responsibility and failure, but her voice was starting to sound hollow, like an actress who had forgotten why she was playing this role. Marcus kicked at a few more items half-heartedly, but I could see doubt creeping into his expression. Amber was still live streaming, but she was spending more time responding to negative comments than celebrating my departure. "Why is she so calm?" I heard someone from the neighborhood ask. If my family did this to me, I would be screaming. But my composure seemed to be having an unexpected effect. The cruel excitement that had driven this spectacle was beginning to fade, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like guilt. Mrs. Patterson had not returned to her porch. The Johnson kids had gone inside. Even the neighbors who remained were no longer recording, just watching, with what appeared to be growing discomfort. This public humiliation was not going according to their plan, and they were starting to realize it. As I loaded the last of my belongings, I took one final look at the house where I had grown up. I memorized the front porch where Robert had taught me to tie my shoes, the living room window, where we had put up Christmas decorations together, the driveway, where I had learned to ride my first bicycle. I was saying goodbye not just to a house, but to the illusion that these people truly knew or valued me. Then I turned to face them all. Patricia still held her phone, but her arm was getting tired, and the camera was shaking. Amber's live stream audience was dropping as viewers lost interest in the one-sided cruelty. Marcus stood with his hands in his pockets, avoiding eye contact. Robert had retreated to the front steps, his earlier rage replaced by something that looked uncomfortable, close to shame. I smiled, not a bitter or sarcastic smile, but a genuine expression of peace. "Enjoy your victory party," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the yard. "You will all be hearing from me very soon." The words were not a threat, but a promise. I was not broken. I was not defeated. I was free. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse in my rearview mirror of my family still standing on the lawn, but their triumphant performance had ended. They looked small and confused, like actors who had just realized they were performing in the wrong play. The neighbors had all gone inside. The cameras had stopped rolling. The entertainment was over, but the consequences were just beginning. The first month was harder than I want to admit. I spent my savings on a room at the Motel 6 downtown at $85 per night, living out of a suitcase and eating fast food while I searched for something better. But instead of feeling sorry for myself, I channeled every ounce of anger and hurt into rebuilding my life. I updated my resume, networked through LinkedIn connections I had built during my previous marketing career, and applied for positions at companies I had only dreamed of working for before. Within 2 weeks, I had landed an interview at Tech Forward Marketing Agency, a rapidly growing digital marketing firm downtown. The CEO, Sarah Melbourne, was a 45-year-old self-made businesswoman who had built her company from nothing. During our interview, she looked at my portfolio of previous work and asked pointed questions about my experience with social media strategy and brand storytelling. I answered with confidence. I did not know I possessed drawing from skills I had developed but never fully valued. Sarah offered me the position of digital marketing specialist on the spot with a starting salary of $55,000 annually. It was more money than I had ever made, and for the first time in months I felt like I could breathe again. I found a small one-bedroom apartment in the Riverside district for $700 monthly. It was tiny but clean, with large windows that let in morning sunlight and a kitchen where I could cook my own meals again. I furnished it slowly with thrift store finds and clearance items, choosing each piece carefully and deliberately. Every lamp, every chair, every dish was mine, chosen by me, paid for with money I had earned. But the real transformation was happening at work. I threw myself into my projects with intensity born from necessity and fueled by genuine passion. Within my first month, I had increased client engagement for our biggest account by 40% through a targeted social media campaign that showcased local businesses in authentic story-driven content. I developed a friendship with Janet Wright, a 38-year-old single mother who worked as our content coordinator. She had struggled through her own family rejection when she became pregnant at 17, and she understood the particular pain of being discarded by people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. We started having lunch together, sharing stories and strategies for healing from family trauma. Sarah Melbourne began taking notice of my work. I was staying late, coming in early, and producing results that exceeded every expectation. My talent for understanding brand psychology and creating emotional connections through marketing had been hiding under years of self-doubt and family diminishment. Now free from their constant criticism and manipulation, I was discovering capabilities I never knew I possessed. After just 2 months, Sarah promoted me to senior digital strategist with a salary increase to $65,000 annually. I was managing major accounts, developing comprehensive marketing strategies, and mentoring newer employees. The confidence that had been systematically destroyed by years of family dysfunction was rebuilding itself through genuine achievement and recognition. I blocked all family members on every social media platform. I changed my phone number and moved to an apartment complex where they could not find me. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely free from their manipulation, their demands, and their constant reminders of my supposed inadequacies. The silence was healing in ways I had never imagined possible. 6 months after that horrible day on the lawn, I had been promoted again to marketing director at Tech Forward. Sarah had offered me partnership opportunities in the company's expansion plans. I had launched my own consulting side business, helping small local businesses develop their digital presence. A local business magazine had featured me in their Rising Stars section, highlighting my innovative approaches to authentic brand storytelling. I moved to a luxury apartment in the downtown district with floor-to-ceiling windows, a modern kitchen, and a view of the city skyline. I traded in my beat-up Honda for a brand-new Toyota Camry, making the payments easily with my new salary. My life had transformed completely, and I was genuinely happy for the first time in years. That is when my phone exploded with messages. 70 notifications appeared overnight, all from family members, whose numbers I had blocked, but who had found ways around my digital boundaries. Mom Patricia at 11:47 p.m. Where are you? Answer your phone now. Brother Marcus at 11:52 p.m. Dude, Mom is freaking out. Just tell us where you are. Sister Amber at 12:03 a.m. I deleted the live stream. Please come back. We need to talk. Dad Robert at 12:15 a.m. Call us immediately. I learned through Janet, who still lived in the old neighborhood, that Patricia's cancer had returned aggressively. Robert had suffered a heart attack and needed surgery. Marcus had been arrested for unpaid child support to a girlfriend I had never heard of. Amber's social media career had collapsed when sponsors discovered her history of cruelty, and she had been evicted from her apartment. They needed me. The daughter they had publicly humiliated and discarded like trash was now their only hope for stability, support, and care. The irony was not lost on me, but surprisingly, I felt no satisfaction in their desperation. Their crisis had not brought me joy, just a deep sense of peace about the choices I had made. I decided to respond, but not in the way they expected. I sent one message to the family group chat they had created. I received your messages. I am doing well and have built a good life. I am willing to discuss rebuilding our relationship, but only with mutual respect, honest communication, and genuine apologies for the harm you caused. I will not be returning to old patterns of manipulation or financial exploitation. If you want me in your life, we start over with healthy boundaries. The healing journey had taught me that real family supports your growth instead of sabotaging it. True love does not require public humiliation for entertainment. Genuine relationships are built on mutual respect, not conditional performance. I learned that my worth was not determined by their opinion of me, and my success was not diminished by their failure to recognize it. Looking back, I realized that the worst day of my life had actually been the first day of my real life. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most do us the greatest favor by forcing us to discover our own strength. I built my own family through friends like Janet and mentors like Sarah, people who celebrated my victories instead of creating content from my struggles. My story is not about revenge or proving people wrong. It is about learning that you cannot control how others treat you, but you can always control how you respond. That day on the lawn, I chose dignity over drama, action over reaction, and my future over my past. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had to walk away from toxic family members to find your own happiness? Have you discovered strength you never knew you possessed when people you trusted betrayed you? Share your story in the comments below, because I know I am not the only one who has faced this choice. Please like this video. If my story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family trauma, and share this with someone who might need to hear that they are stronger than they know. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes losing your family is actually finding yourself.